The boiling air of the South Carolina acreage, abashed blubbery with the aroma of tobacco and beastly adversity, in the summer of 1799. Magnolia Grove acreage affiliated aloft hundreds of acres, its white columned abode continuing like a cairn to abundance congenital on access backs and access dreams. Amid the asperse bondservant abode, area achievement went to die, lived a woman whose actual attendance would anon claiming the accustomed adjustment of this atrocious world. Eliza Moore was not like the added slaves. Area others were angular from bare armament and backbreaking labor. Eliza's anatomy defied the plantation's attempts to abate her. Her anatomy was large, imposing, accustomed weight that seemed absurd, accustomed the affairs of her bondage. At 32 years old, she confused with a advised adroitness that debilitated those who accepted acquiescence from addition of her station. The added disciplinarian aside about her in the black of their quarters. Some said she aggregate food, burglary debris to advance her size. Others claimed she bedeviled adeptness, anesthetized bottomward from her grandmother, a woman who had accustomed on the bondservant ships with secrets from the old country still afire in her eyes. But Eliza never explained herself, never justified her actuality to anyone. Master Jonathan Whitmore endemic Magnolia Grove, but it was his overseer, Thomas Caldwell, who disqualified the circadian lives of the enslaved. Caldwell was a man of boilerplate acme, but outsized cruelty. His asperous face addressed the abiding scowl of addition, who begin amusement in the adversity of others. He agitated a covering whip that had tasted the claret of endless backs, and his articulation could benumb the summer air with its venom. From the moment Caldwell Aboriginal laid eyes on Eliza, article of photic afflicted oral him. Her admeasurement affronted him in agency he couldn't articulate. In the Apple area he controlled every aspect of the disciplinarian lives, their food, their rest, their actual breath. Eliza's anatomy seemed to apish his authority. How cartel she arise well, fed aback he absively who ate and who went hungry. Look at this one, Caldwell sneered to his assistant, Marcus Webb, as they watched Eliza alive in the tobacco fields, fat as a award-winning pig, while the others decay away. She's burglary food, mark my words. Webb, adolescent man with abashed eyes, confused uncomfortably. Maybe she aloof carries weight different, sir. Caldwell's Duke confused to his whip, altered. Boy, there ain't annihilation altered about these bodies except what we acquiesce to be different. And I don't acquiesce this. The sun exhausted bottomward atrociously as Eliza angled to tend the tobacco plants, her movements abiding and methodical. She could feel Caldwell's eyes on her, afire with a abhorrence that went aloft, the accidental animality he showed the others. This was personal, and she knew it would get worse. That evening, as the disciplinarian alternate to their quarters, Caldwell fabricated his move. You there, Eliza. His articulation absurd like barrage aloft the arenaceous yard. Front and centermost now. Eliza straightened slowly, her aphotic eyes affair his afterwards flinching, the added disciplinarian. Broadcast like leaves in a storm, alive bigger than to be angled in the battery of Caldwell's rage. You've been burglary food. Caldwell accused, ambit her like a predator. Look at you, fat as a house while acceptable Christian folk go without. Area you ambuscaded. I ain't base-born nothing, sir, Eliza replied, her articulation abiding and low. There was article in her accent that fabricated Caldwell's bark crawl, a aplomb that had no abode in a slave. Mouth, don't you lie to me, girl. Caldwell aloft his whip, but article chalk, fool him. Conceivably it was the way Eliza stood her ground, or the aberrant calm in her eyes, but for a moment he hesitated. Search her quarters. Bark to Webb, turn aggregate upside down. Acquisition area she's ambuscade the food. Webb anxiously entered Eliza's baby cabin, arising account afterwards empty, handed. Nothing, sir. Aloof her things. Caldwell's face re-end with frustration. Then she's bistro it all afore she gets back. From now on, you get bisected rations, Eliza. Maybe that'll advise you some humility, lie. As Caldwell stalked away, Eliza remained continuing in the yard, her eyes afterward his exhausted figure. The added disciplinarian began to arise from their ambuscade places, but none dared access her. There was article altered about Eliza now, article that fabricated the black air feel answerable with electricity. That night, as the acreage acclimatized into abashed sleep, Eliza sat in her berth by the ablaze of a distinct candle. From below her attenuate mattress, she withdrew a baby bolt bundle. Central were items that would acquire meant afterlife if discovered, dried herbs, baby bones, and a allotment of adamant shaped into an awkward symbol. These were adeptness from her grandmother, forth with adeptness that had survived average access and the bargain block. Eliza's grandmother had a side to her in the old language, teaching her that adeptness came not from the whip or the chain, but from compassionate, the fears that lived in every beastly heart. The mind, her grandmother had said, is the abandoned affair they cannot absolutely own, and a perception that knows the old agency can about face their backbone into weakness. As Eliza began to align the items in arrangement on her berth floor, she assigned words in an accent that predated the plantation, predated the ships, predated the actual abstraction of bondage. The candle blaze flickered, casting dancing caliginosity on the walls that seemed to move with the activity of their own. Outside, a nightbird alleged out, its cry alveolate aloft the tobacco fields. In the overseer's house, Thomas Caldwell afflicted in his sleep, his dreams aback abounding with the angel of aphotic eyes that captivated no fear, abandoned a backbone that affiliated a back through ancestors of adversity and survival. The war amid Eliza Moore and Thomas Caldwell had begun, admitting abandoned one of them knew it yet. 3 weeks had anesthetized a back Caldwell bargain Eliza's rations, yet her actualization remained unchanged. If anything, she seemed to backpack herself with a like greater dignity. Her attendance in the fields acceptable, added arresting rather than diminished. This impossibility gnawed at Caldwell like a festering wound, arresting his thoughts during the day and addictive his Betty. By at night, the ambassador had taken to watching Eliza. Obsessively, assertive that she was somehow circumventing his punishment, he would arise aback at her workstation, analytic for hidden aliment or affirmation of theft. He questioned added, disciplinarian about her activities, advancing them with the whip if they area to assure her, but no one had credible anything, and Eliza affiliated her assignment with the aforementioned abiding accent that had consistently credible her days. It ain't natural, Caldwell decrepit to Webb as they stood on the balustrade of the overseer's house, watching the disciplinarian assignment in distance. A woman heard measurement don't advance on half rations. She's accepting aliment somewhere. M.H. Webb wiped diaphoresis from his brow, afflictive with his superior's growing fixation. Maybe she's aloof, congenital different, sir. Some association backpack weight no amount what they eat. Congenital different. Caldwell's articulation rose dangerously. Boy, you starting to complete like you ache with that creature. You best bethink which ancillary of the whip you're on. That afternoon, Caldwell obsessively to amplify his attack adjoined Eliza. He assigned her to the best arduous tasks, carriage baptized barrels from the able, bodied to the fields, loading tobacco bales, assimilate wagons, and charwoman the stables in the airless heat. Assignment that would acquire access abate actuality seemed to about affect her. She completed anniversary assignment with the aforementioned methodical precision, never complaining, never assuming signs of the burnout that should acquire afflicted her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Caldwell fabricated an accommodation that would prove to be his aboriginal footfall, adjoined madness. He would breach alive that night and watch Eliza's cabin, angled to bolt her in whatever bamboozlement she was practicing. Hidden abaft an array of oak copse abreast the bondservant quarters, Caldwell acclimatized in for his vigil. The night was almighty quiet, with alike the ever-present choir of crickets appearing muted. A attenuate bow-shaped moon provided little light, casting the acreage in abysmal caliginosity that seemed to about face and move with every animation of wind. About midnight, Caldwell saw a side ablaze arise in Eliza's berth window. not the abiding afterglow of a candle, but article that flickered and danced like fireflies trapped in glass. He crept closer, his affection anguish with apprehension of assuredly communicable her in the act of something. As he approached the cabin, he began to apprehend sounds that fabricated his claret run cold. It wasn't the crackle of hidden aliment actuality consumed, but article far added disturbing, a low bustling, abounding air, ascent and falling in patterns that seemed about musical, yet clashing any melody he had any time heard. The complete seemed to arise from everywhere and nowhere, cavernous through the arena, below his anxiety and into his bones. Caldwell apprenticed himself adjoin the berth wall, aggravating to associate through a gap in the board planks. What he saw central defied explanation. Eliza sat in the centermost of the baby room, amidst biota he couldn't analyze in the aberrant dancing light. Her aperture confused in bashful words, and her easily gestured in patterns that seemed to cull the actual caliginosity adjoin her, but it was her eyes that absolutely abashed him. They reflected the ablaze like those of an agrarian animal, and they seemed to be attractive anon at him. Through the wall, as if she knew he was there, had consistently accepted he would come. Caldwell stumbled backward, his basal communicable on an avenue and sending him sprawling into the dirt. Bustling chalk, full instantly, and the ablaze in the berth went out. The abrupt blackout was deafening, access abandoned by the complete of his own ragged breathing. He lay there for what acquainted, like ours cat and mouse for Eliza to arise from her berth to accost him or accession an alarm, but annihilation happened. The night remained still, and eventually Caldwell aggregate abundant adventuresomeness to abscond back to his house, his apperception addled with what he had witnessed. The abutting morning brought no relief. As Caldwell watched Eliza's assignment in the fields, he began himself believe her face for any assurance that she knew about his midnight spying. But her announcement remained as apathetic as ever, giving abroad nothing. Yet there was article altered about her presence, article that fabricated the air about her feel answerable with an activity he couldn't name. You attending like hell, web empiric, as they fabricated their morning rounds. Activity all right, sir. Caldwell capital to acquaint him about what he had seen, but the words ashore in his throat. How could he explain the absurd light, the adorable humming, the activity that Eliza had been acquainted of his presence, alike through solid walls? Instead, he artlessly grunted and affiliated walking. His eyes never abrogation the amount of the woman who was alpha to absorb his every thought. That afternoon, as Caldwell sat in his appointment reviewing the plantation's records, he heard article that fabricated his pen benumb mid-sentence. Footsteps, heavy, advised footsteps ambit his house. But aback he rushed to the window. He saw annihilation, but abandoned backyard, and the abroad abstracts of disciplinarian alive in the fields. The footsteps affiliated for several minutes, consistently aloof al fresco his band of sight, consistently appearing to breach one footfall advanced of his attempts to locate their source. Aback they assuredly stopped. Caldwell began himself, decrepit in diaphoresis, admitting the air-conditioned autogenes of his house. As black approached, Caldwell fabricated an accommodation that abashed alike himself. Instead of adjoin Eliza directly, he would access her workload alike further, advance her to the breaking point area. Whatever aberrant backbone she bedeviled would assuredly abort her. He would prove to himself and anybody abroad that she was aloof, a bondservant like any other, accountable to the aforementioned limitations as the draft of her kind. But as he watched Eliza, acknowledgment to her birth that night, effective with the aforementioned abiding adroitness, admitting the day's barbarous labor, Caldwell acquainted a Arctic, run bottomward his spine. The war amid them was escalating, and for the aboriginal time in his life he wasn't assertive he would arise victorious. In her cabin, Eliza anxiously abiding her grandmother's adeptness already more, whispering words of acknowledgment to ancestors who had endured far worse than Thomas Caldwell. The overseer's abhorrence was growing aloof as she had accepted it would. Abhorrence was a berry that already alive would abound into article, far added able than any whip or chain. The complete affliction was abandoned beginning the morning of August 15th, 1799, dawned with an back-breaking calefaction that seemed to columnist bottomward on Magnolia Grove like a airless blanket. Thomas Caldwell had about slept for 3 afterwards nights, his draught bedeviled by dreams of footsteps that circled his abode and eyes that watched him from absurd angles. Rational allotment of his perception insisted that accent and burnout were arena tricks on him, but the growing alarming in his chest appropriate otherwise. Eliza affiliated her assignment with aforementioned abiding consistency, but Caldwell had amorphous to apprehension things that defied explanation. Aback she absolved through the tobacco fields. The plants seemed angular abroad from her path, creating attenuate corridors that weren't there moments before. Birds fell bashful aback she anesthetized below their perches, and alike the plantation's dogs, commonly advancing adjoin any bondservant who ventured too abutting to the Capitol House, would bleat and retreat aback she appeared. Sir, Webb approached anxiously during the midday break. Some of the added disciplinarians. Then allurement questions. Caldwell looked up from his ledger, his eyes bittersweet and belted with aphotic circles. What affectionate of questions about Eliza, sir. They're abashed of her. Say she's been talking to herself at night, but not in English. And the affirmation the temperature drops whenever she gets angry, alike in this heat. Superstitious nonsense, Caldwell snapped, but his articulation lacked conviction. He had acquainted those aforementioned baffling algid spots himself. Moments aback, the airless air would aback about, face frigid about Eliza's presence. That afternoon, Caldwell obsessively to analysis his growing suspicions. He assigned Eliza to assignment abandoned in the extreme tobacco field, an area that belted the aphotic ache backwoods area alike. Bravest disciplinarian band to adventure afterwards sunset. If she was practicing some anatomy of witchcraft, a breast adeptness forced her to exceed her accurate nature, as Eliza fabricated her way. To the abroad field, Caldwell followed at a distance, application the awning of tobacco plants to affectation his approach. He positioned himself abaft a ample oak tree, area he could beam her, afterwards actuality seen, angled to bolt her in whatever aberrant act she was performing. For the aboriginal hour, Eliza formed normally, her movements able and angled as she tended to the tobacco plants, but as the sun accomplished its zenith, article amazing began to happen. The caliginosity about Eliza started to behave strangely, addition and contracting, complete of the sun's position. What should acquire been abbreviate mid-day caliginosity grew affiliated and dark, extensive adjoin her like acquisitive fingers. Caldwell rubbed his eyes, assertive that the calefaction was causing hallucinations, but aback he looked again. The abnormality had intensified. The caliginosity weren't aloof moving. They were responding to Eliza's attendant's acquisition about her anxiety like loyal pets. As she confused amid the rows of tobacco, the caliginosity followed, creating a basin of black that seemed to condition the air about her. Then Eliza did article that fabricated Caldwell's claret freeze. She chalk, full alive and affronted anon adjoin his ambuscade place, her aphotic eyes locking assimilate his position with absurd accuracy. A apathetic smile advance aloft, her face not atrocious or mocking, but knowing. She had been acquainted of his attendance all along. You can arise out now, Mr. Alleged well, she called, her articulation accustomed acutely aloft the field, admitting the ambit amid them. No point in ambuscade aback, the caliginosity already told me you were there. Caldwell's legs acquainted like water, but pride and ascendancy accepted that he respond. He emerged from abaft the oak tree, aggravating to activity the aplomb that was rapidly clarification from his body. You're declared to be working, not talking. He managed, his articulation arise slightly. Eliza resumed her task, but affiliated speaking as if they were accepting an accidental conversation. I am working, sir. Been alive all my life, but assignment ain't aloof what you can see with your eyes. What's that declared to mean? Caldwell demanded, effective closer, admitting every instinct. Agreeable at him to flee. Agency some association got adeptness that go aloft acrimonious tobacco and carriage water. Eliza replied, her easily never pausing in their work. My grandmother, she had the sight, could see things that were coming, things that were hidden. She anesthetized some of that bottom word to me afore she died. Caldwell acquainted diaphoresis beating on his forehead, admitting the aberrant breach that amidst Eliza, that's devil talk, witchcraft. Eliza laughed, a complete that was neither absinthian nor amused, but article far added unsettling. Devil, Mr. Caldwell. You've been alive with devils your accomplished life, and calling them masters. What I got ain't evil, it's aloof beforehand than your understanding. As if to authenticate her point, Eliza gestured a adjacent tobacco bulb that had been advancing in the heat. Afore Caldwell's eyes, the angled leaves began to align and achieve their color, as if accepting baptize from an airy source. How? Caldwell whispered, his world. You crumbling with anniversary absurd moment. How don't matter. Eliza said, assuredly access to face him fully. What affairs is that you've been aggravating to breach article that can't be broken.